This is part 2 of my Classic WoW video. This is expectations for Classic WoW. If you watched part 1, or if you're just already on board with the whole Classic experience, then cool. If not, I highly recommend that you watch part 1. This video is pretty much about people who kind of know about World of Warcraft already, and they're already on board and are going to play Classic. This is a much more nitty-gritty video compared to the previous one. I'm not going to try and sell you on Classic WoW, but more or less help players who have already decided that they're playing Classic WoW, but they just haven't played an older version of World of Warcraft before. Since over the past year, whenever Classic's release was announced, there have been tons of videos and streams talking about Classic WoW, and for the most part, the content has had the same points. Number 1, the most important part about Classic WoW is the human interaction, aka the community. Number 2, Classic WoW in 2019 is a lot different than Vanilla WoW in 2006. People are just a lot better at video games now. And number 3 is people generally talking about min-maxing, the best this, the best that, the best way to do whatever. I'm not going to waste time talking about the human interaction community aspect of WoW because I think all the veterans have that locked down. No one is disagreeing with that. Same thing goes for the internet climate and skill on average being a lot higher now than it was back in vanilla. I mean, it's just true, we all kind of sucked back in the day, and there's a lot more tools and ways to be a lot better at World of Warcraft now. I mean, people have been playing this game for over a decade. It's really the min-maxing topic that inspired me to make this video. While playing the stress test this past weekend, I read a lot of people talking in general chat about, they're asking what's the best class, what's the best spec, what's the best profession, what's the fastest way to get to level 60, and I couldn't help but just think about all these questions and so many people asking them throughout the weekend that I think it's a really bad mentality to have when going into Classic. And when you watch a bunch of Classic videos, you kind of see that bad mentality is definitely being encouraged by Classic YouTube videos and the people who are streaming Classic WoW. But bear with me, alright? So I kind of want to tackle all those questions like one at a time. The best class question. The best class doesn't exist in World of Warcraft. Each class can fill a different role. A warrior, a hunter, and a priest all do different things. And even though they can all DPS, they even do different types of DPS. And honestly, it not only depends on what you want to do, like DPS, tank, or heal, but if you want the option to do more than just that one thing. If you pick a DPS only class like Rogue, then you can only really DPS for the rest of the game. You can't hit level 50 and decide you want to try out healing. You're stuck being a damage dealer. Honestly, all the classes are viable in their own right, especially if you play a certain class way better than another. People are trying to look at the classes like a tier list, and doing that just isn't the way to go. I've played WoW since Classic, and I've seen people playing OP at the time classes or specs get completely outperformed by people playing classes or specs considered bad. My go-to example is back in Burning Crusade. My one friend played a marksman hunter, which was considered to not be that good of a class specialization. But he consistently outplayed other people, including Beastmaster Hunters, which was the optimal class spec, because he played Marksman Hunter way better than he played anything else. I've seen so many instances of that in my lifetime, of people playing low-tier classes or specs and doing amazing, and I've seen people playing high-tier classes and specs who are terrible. For me personally, I've tried my hand on a few private servers since Classic was announced, and I've been playing different classes during the stress test to try and figure out what I wanted to play in Classic. And in the last stress test, I picked Paladin. Now, I've played Paladin since day 1 of Burning Crusade, when they came to the Horde, and when I started playing Paladin during the last stress test, it just clicked, right? I'm pretty good at being a Paladin. And I've been a pretty good Paladin for a long time. And so playing a class that I'm really good at, I feel really comfortable in, this is the class I want to play. Might not be on the faction I want to be on, but this is the class that really clicks with me. I'm very confident in my skills as a Paladin player. I've played Paladin for a really long time. And I don't even care if Paladin is considered the best or if it's considered the worst class I can be. But I'm enjoying being Paladin, and that's what I'm going to be. I'm not going to worry about some arbitrary tier list, you know? Whatever works for you is going to work for you. Picking Rogue because they're the best at PvP means absolutely nothing if you suck at playing a Rogue. So pick whatever works for you, and don't limit yourself to following some community tier list of what classes are the best or the worst. To be honest, that is the mentality you should have when picking your class and your race. In World of Warcraft, each race has its own set of racial abilities. They're all different, and some of them can add extra benefits to the class that you pick. Like gnomes have increased intellect, which is amazing if you're a gnome mage, since intellect is your best stat, but it means nothing if you're a gnome rogue, since they don't use intellect at all. Or you got orcs. Orcs get blood fury, which increases their melee attack power for a short period of time. That's really good if you're an orc warrior, but it means nothing if you're an orc warlock, since warlocks don't use melee attacks. Not too long ago, I was watching Asmongold stream. Listen guys, it's in the rules, you can't talk about World of Warcraft without talking about Asmongold. Anyway, I was in Asmongold stream, and I watched him watch a video, where in the video, a guy said something along the lines of, if you hope to get into a hardcore guild, they're going to want you to min-max everything, meaning you can't be something like a Tauren hunter. Because min-maxing wise, a troll or orc would be better for a hunter than a Tauren. But that's honestly the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Piggybacking off of what I was just talking about involving classes, the same thing applies to races. If you're a really good Tauren hunter, no one's gonna care that you're missing that 1% bow damage or whatever. Why? Because it doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, yeah, it's good to have some of these things, but that doesn't conflict with anything. No one cares about that, right? If you like the racial abilities of one race over another, just pick the race you want to be. Don't worry about min-maxing to the extent that you're playing a race you don't want to be and playing a class you don't want to play because you want to be the best tank or best healer or best DPS possible. Nobody is going to care. And again, because no one's going to care, don't limit your choices because you feel that you have to min-max. If you want to be a Night Elf Rogue, be a Night Elf Rogue. If you want to be a Tauren Hunter, be a Tauren Hunter. Your skill is what's going to determine if high-end guilds want to raid with you, not your character race. Speaking of raiding guilds, I want to talk about raids. This hasn't exactly been brought up, but it's been a while since the personal loot hasn't been in World of Warcraft. You might be used to how this works, right? You beat a boss and you're guaranteed either like a gold or piece of gear, whatever. In Classic WoW, the looting system is going to be Master Looter, but more accurately, it's going to be something like Master Looter with Loot Council. So you're not guaranteed to get anything from beating a boss in a raid. If gear drops that you can use, you'll either be rolling against another raid member for it or spending DKP. But you probably already know how Master Looter kind of works. You probably already know that. Of course you know about that, and you know about DKP and all of that stuff. What I'm assuming a lot of folks don't know about is Loot Council. I used to have a saying which went, "You're not getting the Warglaives." However, we're going to be playing Classic WoW, so nobody's getting Warglaives. I'm just going to change it up to, "You're not Asmongold." Now what I mean by this is, imagine you're raiding Molten Core with like Asmongold's guild, right? You're in his guild and you're raiding Molten Core. And you down Ragnaros, and the bindings for Thunder Fury drop. Who do you think is getting that? Like, who do you think is going to get Thunder Fury? You and all of your saved up DKP, or Asmongold, who just spent all of his DKP on like a tier chest or some crap? It's going to be Asmongold. Who's going to get the first piece of tier 2 warrior legs that drops in that guild? It's going to be Asmongold. You might be saying, well, I'm not in a streamer's guild, and I'm not on a streamer's server. You're going to have the exact same problem, except you can't blame it on streamer privilege. When Thunder Fury, or the trinket off of Nefarian drops, or whatever, the good gear, it's going to go to the guild leader, or it's going to go to the main tank, or it's going to go to the raid leader, regardless of DKP. It's not going to go to you. When good gear drops, the Loot Council is going to make sure the most important players in the guild get the good stuff. And that might not seem fair to you, and you're kind of right. It isn't really fair, but I've got a good story for you, alright? Way back in Burning Crusade, the best guild on my server at the time had just killed Illidan for the first time. You know, they beat the last boss, a Black Temple. And the Priest tier 6 chess piece drops. And this Priest, she spent all of her DKP on the chess piece. You know, so the first tier 6 chess piece of the server, you know, it goes to this one girl. And within like the hour, she server transferred and joined a guild that had already downed a boss or two in Sunwell. Our server wasn't very good. So she transfers and joins a guild that had already downed a boss or two in the Sunwell. And people do that shit all the time. That guild was not just out of their first tier 6 chest piece, but also like a player they just geared up, right? They're out of two things. And because of stuff like that, guilds don't usually give randos or not as trusted members of the guild good gear, because good gear doesn't drop that often. And when you get your legendary or your tier 6 chest and then bounce, like I said, now the guild is not only out of a player, but it's out of that good gear they just gave them. And again, this isn't the best system, but it is a system that most guilds use. This is the system that's set up to try and prevent things from happening, like the Priest in the tier 6 chest. So be prepared to not get gear when raiding. I personally enjoy raiding a lot, regardless of if I get the best gear while raiding or not, but not everybody's me. So be prepared for what old school raiding was like. One person or a small group of people in charge of the loot of 40, and sometimes it's just not gonna be fair. The last thing I wanted to talk about is leveling. Personally, I think there is a lot of good content in vanilla World of Warcraft, and I'd encourage you to try and do as much of it as you can. Some folks were talking about rushing to the max level by grinding dungeon trash or following guides that zoom you through the game, and by doing that, I think you're missing a good amount of what the game has to offer. Lower level dungeons can actually be fun. Exploring the world and having adventures of your own really do make World of Warcraft a truly special experience. For people who have audiences and need to provide content as fresh as possible, it makes sense for them to rush through Classic. Soda Poppin' and Asmongold kind of need to rush through the game because that's like the thing to do. They got to get raids going and PvP groups and events running. They got to provide content. Chances are that you don't have an audience you're trying to entertain while playing, so there is literally no harm in taking it easy and exploring the world. It's a world that I and many others fell in love with, and if I can get more people to enjoy this game as much as I did back then, that would be one of the best things ever. I hope Classic WoW is going to be good, and I hope most people have a good time with it. I'm not calling out or am against anyone who's talking about min-maxing or blasting through levels. I think for returning or veteran WoW players, folks who know exactly what they want to do and what they're getting into, the level rushing and race, class, profession, min-maxing is all fine. But this is for the people who are newer, who watch these Classic WoW videos or streams and then get the wrong idea. Like the idea that if you're not rolling a warrior or a rogue or whatever, then you're playing a bad class. I just don't want new players to feel like their options are limited, and I also wanted to let folks know that raiding in Classic WoW is going to be a lot different than raiding with personal loot. Thanks for watching, and take it easy, and hopefully y'all have a good time with Classic.